Hello, friends. I'm just getting all of my equipment set up. Hello, friends. Oh boy. I'm just, all right. Volume is down on my iPad. Um, let's make sure that everything is working. It looks like things are working. If you know, I don't have the greatest luck with the technology gremlins, so we're it's the day after Christmas, and hopefully everything is going to cooperate. I hope you guys all had a wonderful Christmas. Um, we had my mom came over the day before, I guess on the 23rd. We had some time with her. She's still here. She's doing a gingerbread house with my kids over at my house. And so she's getting some nice time with my kiddos. We had a really nice, just kind of laid back, chill Christmas day. Um, I finished up, I make these huge cookie boxes for some of our friends and family from church and my husband's coworkers and things like that. So, and I like to decorate them with little ornaments that I make out of felt. And so I was finishing all of that up because I was sick for 2 weeks before Christmas, so I was playing catch up for the first part of this week. So now it's just been kind of chill. So to that end, I don't have a finished project to show you for our live today. We're just going to play with the pastel watercolors from Pinkfresh Studio. Um, Hello to all of our friends. Let's see, we've got Michael, Marjorie, Kathy, Cynthia, Cindy. Hello, friends. I'm so glad that everybody can hear and see me. So, like I said, we're going to play with the pastel watercolors, which I know, we're in Christmas mode, and so everything's red and green and, vibrant jewel tones. We did those last week. Today, we're going to play with the pastel colors, the pastel colorway from the watercolor line. Now, when I first saw the pastel line, I was like, couldn't I just do that with adding water to my watercolor, to the other colors? Not so. After you play with them, you recognize that once you have a really bright, vibrant color, no matter how much you water it down, you're not going to really get a true pastel. You're going to get a much lighter version of that vibrant, bright color, but those pastel colors, they start out light. So it's if you struggle like I do with having a little bit of a heavy hand when it comes to color, these pastel watercolors are really great for maintaining that really light, airy, ethereal kind of look, especially if you are working with florals that are naturally white or very pale blush, very light colors. We're going to be working with the Magnificent Magnolia set today. And magnolias, if you are at all interested in flowers, they come in they come in pale blush, they come in white, they come in, I believe, a kind of a really deep, like Bordeaux color. But they also, it's hard to get those really pale pastel colors right. But with the pastel watercolors, that is super easy. Pinkfresh has has done the work for you in creating these really pale colors. So I am going to flip my camera around and we'll just start playing. I don't have a finished card for you. We'll see how far we get, and hopefully, we'll have enough time to make a complete project. But I'm just going to flip my camera around and we will go ahead and get started. Let me make sure that everything is the way I want it to. If I cleaned up my desk behind me, we would have more space. However, All right. So let me get this straightened and then we will start. So, like I was saying, the pastel colors, you can see this is at the top on all of my swatches, this is undiluted color, okay? So you've got these lovely pale shades of all of your favorite Pinkfresh ink colors. So we've got lemon whip, bay leaf, mint, sage, sky blue, slumber, soft lilac, ballet slippers, coral reef, peach fuzz, warm buff, and misty coast. Those warm buff and misty coast, those I would say would be a really great. I mean, they're all wonderful watercolors, and these pastels are really great for maintaining that really light pastel effect on your watercoloring. But having these two, Warm Buff and Misty Coast, when I am ink blending, if I want to kind of mute my colors down a little bit, Warm Buff is the color that I reach for. I can blend that over the top of my colors and it softens them a little bit and makes them a little bit more muted. It's kind of there is something involved in color theory that I'm not really super well versed in enough to be able to feel comfortable talking to you guys about it. But there's something about adding neutrals to your vibrant colors that will make them kind of toned down and make them a little bit more almost vintage, like that, like a vintage filter in your from your Instagram or whatever. It kind of tones those colors down. So those two colors are worth it just right off the bat to have this pastel palette. And then you've got all of these beautiful, super pale pastel versions of your favorite colors. And I am going to be using, you guys, during my live last week, you requested that I show you how to do some watercoloring on with foiled images, and you can see how beautifully the hot foil worked with this Pinkfresh Studio watercolor paper. It's a 140-pound cold press, so it does have a little bit of texture to it. It's a nice sturdy weight. It's got that texture to it, which I think is great for watercoloring. But it picked up all of these gorgeous details on this magnificent Magnolia press plate perfectly. So I just wanted to show you how beautifully this watercolor paper works with your hot foil because that was a big request last week during my live. So this is what we're going to be working with today. This is the image that we'll be working with. I have the obviously the watercolor paper. And then I have also the blush glitter cardstock. So this is going to be part of our background if we get far enough to make a complete card. Hopefully we will. So I've used the Magnificent Magnolia press plate. And then if we get far enough to create a card, we're going to add the Lacy Lattice with that glitter cardstock behind our pretty Magnolia. Um, so, all right. So to start, I wanted to show you guys, where did I put that? I wanted to show you guys how to create an ombre background. So this is just a piece of, I believe it's 4.5 by 6 because I cut one of these sheets of watercolor paper down into four equal pieces, and the watercolor paper is 9 by 12. So I'm pretty sure this is 4.5 by 6. I have just taped it down to my watercolor board, which this is just a bamboo um, cutting board that I got from TJ Maxx or Marshalls or someplace for like $3. And I've taped it down using my painter's tape so that it stays nice and flat while it dries. And I just want to show you guys really quickly how you can create a watercolor background super, super quick and easily with these Pinkfresh watercolors. Now, in my first live, we did talk about the importance of having multiple sizes of brushes. And I think this is going to illustrate to you why it's nice to have a large brush and a smaller brush for the detail work. Um, Okay, making sure I'm not missing any questions. If you guys have any questions, I forgot to mention this at the beginning. Write question first in all caps and then type your questions so that I can see it really easily. Okay, I don't want to miss any questions. So I've got on my palette, I've got my microfiber cloth. This is my silver black velvet size 8 watercolor brush. And then on my palette, my ceramic palette, I have Sage, Slumber, soft lilac, and ballet slippers watercolors. Now, these, again, we talked last week a lot about how the watercolors and the reinkers are not interchangeable. The watercolors are formulated so that the color remains consistent no matter how much water you add to it, whereas the reinkers are not designed to be diluted down with water. So, I just wanted to touch on that again and make sure that everybody understands that. So I have all of those colors on my ceramic palette already squirted out. I shook them before and squirted them on my palette. I have my clean water. And what we're going to do, which this is a little bit different technique than what I did on the piece that I just showed you, but I want to show you that wet on wet technique that we talked about last week. I am just going to take my nice big watercolor brush and I'm just going to dampen the entirety of my watercolor paper panel. And I'm going to let it dry for just a second, maybe suck up a little bit of that excess water. You can see, I don't know if you can see how shiny that is with the light. We don't need it to be completely sopping wet. So all I'm doing is I'm drying my brush on my microfiber cloth and using that. We talked last week a little bit about the thirsty brush concept that I learned from Dawn Woolslegel, who is a master watercolorist. And you suck up some of that excess water. Your brush acts like a vacuum almost. Okay. So we're going to go in Roy G. Biv order because that's how my brain works. I like things to move, to blend smoothly together. So we're going to start with ballet slippers. And I'm just going to drop that color on my damp watercolor paper. And because this watercolor paper is already damp, it is going to do that blooming technique that we talked about last week. It's not going to be as super, super, super vibrant as it would be if we did wet to dry, if we left the cardstock dry. But I wanted this to be a really nice, soft um, layer behind our Magnolia blooms because those are going to be nice and light. We're going to take advantage of that lovely uh, uh, pastel, and we're going to just create this really kind of pretty rainbow ombre background behind it. And so that water that's already soaked into the cardstock is helping to uh, blend those colors together effortlessly. You can see how the ballet slipper and the soft lilac are blending together just really, really nicely. Um, and it is going to dry a little bit lighter than we originally laid it down. I'm going to add a little bit more water down here on this bottom section because it dried on me while I was yakking. Now, if you notice, where did my swatch go? Slumber is probably the most vibrant color out of all of the colors on this in this pastel palette. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my water dropper and I'm just going to drop some water onto my slumber palette area. And that way it's a little bit more pastel. These are pastel colors, but that one is really, really vibrant. And I don't want vibrant. I want soft. I want this to be kind of a wintry sunrise backdrop. Isn't that poetical? So we're just going to keep kind of moving color around using a light hand and that water on the background, the water that we've already added to uh, our watercolor paper, is doing some of that blending work for us. It's allowing those colors to bloom and move together. Oh, I'm shedding. That was one of my own hairs. Whoops. So you can see just how pretty, look at how pretty that is. And that took just a few minutes. And it really does remind me of like one of those brilliant but super serene winter sunrises. Not that I see that many of them, but I'm not an early riser. But so we're just going to leave that taped to the watercolor board. And again, this is a board that my husband made for me. It's got my some of my flowers on it and my name. You can easily use a piece of really nice thick um, cardboard or tags, not tag stock. What is that called? Chipboard, or a cutting board, like I showed you earlier. There's lots of, you don't have to have a fancy board like this. This is just, I'm extra. So my husband made this for me. So we're going to leave this on our board taped down so to allow it to dry completely while we work on our other watercoloring so that it reduces the warping. This is nice sturdy watercolor paper, but no matter how sturdy the watercolor paper is, if you add this level of moisture to it, it's gonna warp. You can kind of see how it's warped already a little bit, that it's kind of got that little dip right here. And that's just the nature of the beast. So we're just gonna put this aside and let it dry. Let's see. Kathy says I wouldn't know anything about an unclean desk. I have two unclean desks, Kathy. This is a big problem. But I was working on those ornaments all week and my cookies and everything. And so my plan is next week I'm going to work on tidying. I want to get some purging done and do some of that for the new year. So start off the new year on the right foot. So I have hot foiled this magnificent Magnolia image onto the Pinkfresh Studio watercolor paper again, using this is matte gold glimmer hot foil. I used the Spellbinders glimmer hot foil system, and you can see how beautifully it picked up all of those details. This watercolor paper I mean it's a little pricey to use for for hot foiling, but it picks up. I've never had a problem with this watercolor paper and hot foil. Sometimes hot foil doesn't want to adhere to super textured papers. This paper is just the perfect combination of smooth and textured for it to work beautifully with hot foil and with better press. We you can do both with it. It's really just a wonderful, wonderful paper. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to add some more ballet slipper to my palette because I used a lot of it with my background. Okay, let's see. So we're going to do we're going to do wet on dry. Last week we wet each petal and then dropped the color in and allowed it to bloom on its own. This week we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to add wet watercolor to dry watercolor paper. And then I'm going to maneuver that color around with my paintbrush. And we're going to be doing a combination of soft lilac and ballet slipper because I feel like magnolias are kind of a blush pink. Light purple is a great way to add shadows to very pale images. So like if you have a snowman, you can use um, soft lilac or slumber, diluted slumber, obviously, but you can use pale blues and pale purples to add shadows. And that'll help indicate kind of shading and shadows and things like that. Can you dry that using a heat tool? Jennifer asked. Yes, you can speed the process along with a heat tool. I don't like it personally. I feel like it doesn't keep it as flat when you kind of zap it with your heat tool, but that is something if you're in a pinch, you could do that. I prefer to let it dry naturally. Just, I don't know if it actually makes a difference or not, but that's just my preference. So, okay, we are going to, I've got this is my number 6 brush. It's got a nice crisp point to it. And I'm just going to pick up some of the ballet slipper watercolor, and I'm going to add that to my petals. Now, when I'm watercoloring flowers, which that's primarily what I watercolor is flowers, I want to make sure that I am keeping my brush tip pointed away from me. That allows me to have the best control. I also try to make sure that I am not putting too much water on my brush, which is why it's important to have some sort of a cloth or stamp chamois or even a paper towel will do to dab excess water on, because if you get that extra blop of water right there and it whoops onto your paper, it's going to create kind of a reverse bloom that we do not want. So I am dropping watercolor onto my dry paper, and then I'm cleaning my brush and I'm pulling that color out. And the further away I pull it from the center of my flower, the lighter it will be. So it will fade nicely into white, because we want to create that pale, blushy, uh, uh, almost white magnolia bloom. So then this one is pretty far back. This petal is pretty far back. So I started with the soft lilac, but I am just kind of maneuvering that color around. I'll add a touch of the ballet slipper towards the top. And I'm adding this towards where the flowers are tucked underneath each other, the petals are tucked underneath each other, to kind of increase that shadow notion. So this petal is cupped. It's cupped like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add undiluted purple where that shadow would be. I'm going to pull that out because I want this petal to look really, have lots of contrast between this little section right here that is kind of curved over and this section behind it that is in the shadows. So I'm going to add a touch of the ballet slipper to get that nice rosy pink, nice blushy pink. And again, watercolors typically dry a little bit lighter than the way you lay them down. So you can see how nice and light this petal in the front here is. So this will dry a little bit lighter than what we've got here. Making sure that I'm not missing any questions. Yes, Christina said moving the paper around on the wooden base instead of taping it to the table. That is why I do it like this, because I like to be able to maneuver my paper so that I can keep that brush tip pointed away from me. So I'm choosing the petals that are the most that would be kind of the most shadowed to work on first. Kind of, I've talked before in videos about reverse psychology when it comes to color, just because I find it hard to keep things light, as which is very helpful to have these pastel watercolors. Working on the darkest petals first gives me my baseline for how light I need, how much extra water and how much light I need to add to the petals in the front. So I start from the darkest and I work to the lightest. And that kind of helps me gauge how dark I want to make things, how light I want to make things as we get closer to the light source that resides in my head. So T Bender said she struggles with knowing where the shadows would go. I operate under the assumption that there is a light source pointing directly at this. So everything that is closest to me is going to be light. The further away, the further it is in the back where things are tucked behind it, that's going to be darker. I also operate under the assumption that all flowers start from a single point. You have the center of your flower, and then you have petals that go around that center of that flower. The color most likely is going to be more concentrated towards the center of the flower. So where those petals connect to the center of the flower and the stem, that's where I like to concentrate my color. I like to leave the edges of the petals a little bit lighter, because that also helps to increase the amount of contrast. And that contrast is what gives those petals the shape. It's what gives those petals the different definition and keeps things interesting. It keeps things from looking too cookie cutter from petal to petal. So that's my little soapbox about shadows. So again, this petal is tucked underneath several petals. So we're just going to add quite a lot of color. Now, if you'll notice, I am kind of pushing this color back towards the center of where that petal connects to the rest of the flower. That's because it started to spread a little bit too much for my taste. So, nice thing about these colors is that you can maneuver the color for quite a while after you lay it down on the paper. And you can see that I've kind of got a little bit of extra pooling in this foil, in these foiled lines. That is the only downfall with watercoloring on a foiled image. Because the foil presses down into the watercolor paper, it will create kind of a dip. So when you lay your color down on your watercolor paper, you have to be careful not to allow that color to pool in those lines. So I'm just increasing the contrast there. So we're just going to move on to another petal while that dries. And you can always go back in with a nice high quality watercolor paper like this. Adding more layers is a piece of cake. You don't need to worry about the paper pilling or fraying. I'm going to add some more of that ballet slipper to keep that pretty blushy pink color. The lilac, soft lilac is great for shadows, and then we add just a touch of that blush. And because I've dampened that area already by pulling the color out, the watercolor, the ballet slipper is blending nicely into the lilac, soft lilac, sorry. Okay. Karen says, watercoloring is intimidating. Watercoloring can be intimidating if you are unwilling to just try. I promise you, it sounds intimidating, but once you pick up your brush and just play, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can't expect perfection the first time, but the more you play, the better it will get. The easier it will be, the less frustrated you will feel. And if you have questions, there are lots of great resources on YouTube. I have lots of videos on the Pinkfresh YouTube channel with watercoloring tips. Dawn Wollslagle, who works with Pinkfresh, she also has lots of beautiful watercoloring tip videos. Honestly, I would say that your best way to learn is just to kind of pick up some basics from a YouTube video and pick up your brush and play, because it's only paper and it will not it's not going to be too hurtful if you make a mistake. Hurtful to your wallet, I should say. So we're just this is another petal that is kind of cupped over. It's kind of curled over on itself, but then it also flips back around. So we've got this part under that's kind of curled underneath, but then we've got this part right here that is kind of it's an interesting petal. It's a uniquely shaped petal, but it's beautiful. I'm just going to add shadows. And I'm pulling that color out with my brush. You can maneuver, watercolor is a very forgiving medium because you can maneuver those colors quite a lot. You have time to maneuver the colors. And especially if you're using light colors like this, you can even re-wet those problem areas, and you can add more color. You can move the color around even after it's dried. So don't be afraid to go back and fix mistakes such as they are. Like this one, I'm adding a little bit more purple because it dried a little bit lighter than I would like. And I want to make sure that this petal, since it's directly behind this petal that we've got nice light blush on, I want to make sure that this petal is a little bit darker and a little bit more contrast. Layers in watercolor are going to give you that extra push of dimension and shape and just general interest. The more you layer your watercolors after each layer is dry, I tend to do 2 to 3 layers just to get that really beautiful detail and dimension and shape. One second, I need a drink. Karen, we are using the Magnificent Magnolia press plate, and I have hot foiled it using matte gold hot foil. Let me make sure I'm not missing any other questions. Excuse me. Yep, Brenda, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments because I'm doing my best to try to. I didn't want to put too much pressure on myself today to finish a card because I wanted to make sure that if you guys have questions that I can see them and answer them. So now we have completed the majority of these petals. The only areas that are left are the ones that are kind of the petals that are curled over. We've got this little area right here. So like right here, these little spots that are kind of curled over a little bit that I want to keep really light. I want to take advantage of this pastel color palette that we're using, and I want to keep them almost white. So I have Ballet Slipper watercolor that I'm adding a touch of water to, and then we're just going to add it to those areas that are kind of curled over on themselves because we want just the slightest hint of color on these spots that are these petals that are kind of curled over on themselves. Now this one is tucked behind this one, so we're going to add a tiny touch of purple, of the soft lilac. Sorry, Jody, I didn't use the correct name. But we're going to allow that diluted purple to kind of bloom into the very pale ballet slipper. So now this one is curled over, so we're going to start the shadow from right here, from the bottom. I guess it's the top technically, but it's the bottom of the petal. Sometimes you have to see things in your head and it doesn't make sense with what comes out of your mouth when it comes to watercoloring. It's all in how you see the shadows in your head. And sometimes that doesn't make sense to other people. But again, the more you play, the more clear that kind of information becomes. So we're just making these as light as we can. And remember, this is watercolor, so it's going to dry a little bit lighter. I'm using my thirsty brush to kind of pick up a touch more of the color from this one. I'm going to add some deep purple to this one since it's kind of twisted. And I'm going to add some deep purple down here because that's very much tucked underneath. And like I said last time, if you put your colors on a ceramic palette and allow it to air dry, the water evaporates. The liquid part of it evaporates out. So if you want like a super concentrated version of ballet slipper, this really pale pastel pink, but you want it to be a little bit more concentrated, you can create a palette for yourself. Just squirt your watercolors onto your palette and allow it to air dry, and then you can pick up that really concentrated color and create a more intense, vibrant version of that same pale pastel pink. And if yesterday had not been Christmas and the day before had not been Christmas Eve, I would have done that for this live just to show you the difference. I showed it a little bit last week, but I would like to demonstrate that. Maybe I'll try to do that for next week's live just to show you what it looks like to have those super concentrated, dried out colors. It's almost like dehydrating them. And it's a nice trick to have in your back pocket when you're working with these watercolors. So here we've got a little bud. We're going to do both colors. Let's see. Karen, it really is. Watercoloring is one of the most relaxing things that I have found. I struggle with some anxiety and different things, especially after I had my little boys. And watercoloring just is, it's so soothing and just really just enjoyable. So especially the more you practice, the more enjoyable it becomes, the less stressful, because I know that it can be stressful for people who want perfection, and I count myself among them. But watercolor kind of allows you, it gives you the excuse to just kind of let go and let the water and the watercolors do kind of what they want. And then you can kind of come back in later and finagle it a little bit, and it can become something entirely new. So it's really a wonderful medium. So I'm just trying to, now you can see I went a little crazy. I got a little bit too much in this little well here. So that's why it's important to have a brush with a nice crisp point so that you don't go crazy. I got busy talking about the emotional aspect of watercoloring and not paying as much attention as I should have. Excuse me. My little boys, one of them had COVID, one of them did not, but now they both have horrible coughs, and those coughs they just won't go away. And I hope they didn't share them with anybody else, but my cough from having COVID hasn't gone away yet. So we sound really ill, but we're not. That cough just doesn't want to leave. Excuse me again, I'm sorry. All right, so we've got the buds and this large bloom here all finished. Now we're going to work on this one. How are we doing on time? I've got about 20 minutes left. Maybe we'll just do half. So we'll just do this portion this way since we're low on time, and we'll just cut it in half like I did last week to save on time. So now this is sage. This is a beautiful kind of it's almost a gray, but it's got that beautiful bluey green color. And I'm just laying down a base layer, pulling that color out, that pastel color out. And this color has been sitting for a little while, so you can see the difference that that concentrated color makes. Like I was talking about with the uh, the ballet slipper. This has sat out a little bit, and so it's kind of dehydrated a little bit. So you've got a little bit more concentration of just the pigments of the sage green. And I'm just kind of barely dropping color into this spot right here. This is the area where everything kind of overlaps. And so that to me is going to be the darkest. It's going to have the most shadows. And this would be a really great spot to have even more of that kind of bright concentrated, that intense concentrated color. So if you do decide to create a palette that kind of dehydrate and let the colors dehydrate, that's the spot that you would use those really intense, vibrant colors. That with the dried watercolors is where everything kind of overlaps and intersects because you want that deep dark shadow contrasting with the lighter colors in front of it, if that makes sense. Roadrunner asks, how do you decide on colors to use? I tend to stick to monochromatic colors. I like to keep in the same kind of color family. So pinks and purples, blues, I keep with the same kind of cool colors. If I'm working, if I just feel like doing a cool color, I also take a lot of, like if I'm working with a flower that I don't know that I've ever seen in real life, I'll look up pictures of it. Like Magnolia, I could just type in Google Magnolia flower and hit the images button, and it would show me what a magnolia looks like. And so then I can make an informed decision on what colors magnolias are. Sometimes, like if I want to do kind of an this would be this flower particularly would be really pretty with pale blues, I think, to do kind of like a chinoiserie effect, like Delft blue powdery, the blue and white. I think this would be really pretty to do in a blue and white color palette, but I wanted to show you guys the pastels today. So it just kind of it depends on my mood. It depends on if I'm trying to do comfort watercoloring or if I'm doing something that's a little bit more I want to challenge myself. It just kind of depends on the day what colors I use. Like I said, purples and blues are great for shadows. Obviously green for foliage. Um, and then kind of what colors the flowers are in nature help to dictate. But like when I'm doing a an ombre background, like the one that we did at the beginning, I pick colors that are next to each other on the color wheel so that I don't have to worry about kind of a muddy watercolor mess. I don't want to mix yellow and purple, say, because that those two colors next to each other, because of the nature of watercolor, if they blended together, it would create kind of a mud, like literal, almost mud. So that's something to keep in mind too when you're making your color selections is how will these colors mix together? And that's something like color theory, like you learned in grade school when you learned about, complementary versus colors that are across from each other on the color wheel and all of that. Karen, yes, I'm using the pastel colors today. And I believe Jody will have all of the products that I'm using linked in the description. I don't know if she's already done that or not. I was a little bit late in getting my product list to the lovely ladies of Pinkfresh because of the holiday. So, but all of the products will be listed at some point in the future if they're not there yet. So I'm just filling in. This is just with these small little areas like the stem, I'm just doing basic, just kind of filling in the color. I don't need to do anything really over the top with those teeny little spaces. Roadrunner says I always stick to the more natural colors. I'm afraid to try different combos, but I've seen the most beautiful flowers colored in colors I would never try or think of. And that's something that also, it just like I said, it depends on the day. Do I want to do something that is just comfortable, or do I want to push the boat out a little bit and see what kind of fun color combinations I can come up with? I do, again, try to stick with colors that will mix nicely together. If I'm doing like a background like we did earlier, I try to stay away from colors that are going to make mud. But, it just kind of depends on how I'm feeling that day for the color choices that I make. If I'm feeling adventurous or if I'm feeling a little bit more classic. It's always a good idea to shake your liquid watercolors before you add more to your palette. Okay, so I'm going to do a little trick here. I am going to take soft lilac because we already used soft lilac on our colors on our watercolor. I took 2 drops of soft lilac and I'm going to take several drops of sage and I'm going to mix those together and I'm going to use that to create a few shadows on these leaves. And it's going to create kind of a, let's see if I can find a spare piece of watercolor paper so that I can show you how that looks. So this is sage by itself, kind of a really pretty bluey green. This is soft lilac by itself. The mixture of those two creates almost a bluey gray. And so this color we're going to use to add some extra shadows to these leaves that are kind of tucked behind so that we have that extra contrast and extra um, shadow interest, if that makes sense. So I've got this mixture of sage and lilac that I'm just adding. I'm not going to add it to the petals or the foliage that's in the front that's closer to the light source. I'm going to add it to the ones that are tucked in the back. This would be a really great one to have allow to dry on your palette. If we had time, I would allow it to dry and just come back later so that it was super, super concentrated. And the nice part about using the soft lilac and the sage, we already have those colors in our colored watercolored piece. So it's not going to add any additional it's not going to add any additional color visually. It's a combination of the two different colors. So it helps to keep to a minimum the kind of the visual busyness of the color combinations. Because if you get too many colors in there, there's a fine line between having too many colors and having not enough colors. And you want to try to limit the amount of colors that you add to your palette for each piece, just because it gets kind of visually overwhelming if you add too many, if that makes sense. Sarah asked, what's your favorite big brush brand for coloring larger areas? I almost primarily use silver black velvet. I have it in lots of different sizes. I think the biggest size I have a flat, the square brush, but I also have, I believe it's a size 12 round, and that's a great brush for doing like backgrounds and things like we did at the very beginning. Okay, just a few more touches of shadow. I'm going to add some shadow to this leaf that's tucked behind um, the stem so that there's a little bit of contrast between the stem and the leaf. I'm going to add a touch here. See how that's kind of that gray? Because we're going to cut this in half. So I don't need to watercolor the whole thing. After we die cut it. Thank you guys all for joining me today. It's the day after Christmas, so maybe you're in your craft room playing. Hopefully, you had a lovely holiday together with family and all of the yummy food that comes with Christmas. I make these huge cookie boxes. I made Buckeyes and Puppy Chow and Biscotti and um oh goodness, what all did I make? I made about 7 or 8 different kinds of cookies and then I put them in boxes and decorate them with little felt ornaments that I've created and give them out. And it's not Christmas unless I've made a bunch of cookies and given them away because I don't have anything else to do. I got to make cookies for other people. So we're just touching up a little bit of the areas that I need just a bit more shadow. And then we're going to allow this some time to kind of soften that edge a little bit. That's spread out and dried in a harsh line. So I'm just going to use my damp brush to spread that line out a little bit. Okay, we're going to let this dry and I'm going to work on some die cutting. So now I'm going to die cut. This is Blush Glitter Essentials Blush Cardstock. And I have the Lacy Lattice cover plate. And this is going to be layered on top of our ombre background that we created at the very beginning of the live. So I'm just going to trim this and run it through my die cutting machine. Give me 1 second. My hands will return momentarily. All right. Family was wonderful, but now I need some me time. I am with you on that. It's weird because I do this for a full-time job. It's always a weird time of year that I'm not spending, a full work day at my desk creating content because I'm doing all of the family things, which is extremely important and not something that I would ever want to miss, but it feels good to get back to kind of that feeling of normalcy after the fun and the chaos of holiday merrymaking. All right, so we've got our pretty glittery scalloped cover plate piece. And I am going to zap. I know I said I don't like to do this, but our watercolor background, look at how beautiful that looks after it's dried. I'm going to zap it very quickly with my heat gun just to make sure that it is nice and flat and completely dry. Once it's mostly dry like this, the color is pretty well set. So hitting it with my heat gun for this last little portion of dry time isn't really going to make a big difference. I don't know if you guys can hear that with my ear pods on, the sound of my heat gun. You'll have to let me know. Cashew brittle. That sounds good. I made so much that I have a ton for myself. I made toffee pretzels, and they are so good. All right. I was not sad when we had lots left over after I made my boxes. Got to make stuff that you like. That way, if there's leftovers, you want to eat them and they don't just go to waste, right? Right? That's how I roll. Okay, so we're just pulling this up. It did warp a little bit. Still, you can see that it's still a little bit warped down there, but we're in a rush, people. So now I'm going to just trim this down to A2 card size. Trim off the white sections first and see, let's see, 4 1/4. Uh-oh, it was a little overzealous. Well, that'll be all right. It'll be covered up with the cover plate. Let's see, I'm gonna cut off a little bit more of the green and a little bit of the pink to make it 5 1/2 by 4 1/4. Okay. How are we doing on time? Oh, good. We're doing great on time. Last week I was like 10 minutes over. So I'm trying to avoid that this time. I know you guys were very nice about me going over last time, but all right. So I'm going to get my watercolor supplies off of the desk. Have to be careful because they're liquid. Don't want to spill anything on my computer. That would be bad. Okay, so I've got some liquid glue. Mainly just go around the edges. If we had more time, I probably would use foam adhesive just to make some extra dimension on this, but foam adhesive in small areas like this can be a little bit of a pain. So we're just going to go around the edges with liquid adhesive. And in the center. Well, didn't that just work out nicely where it covered up that line? Okay, so I'm going to put this underneath my paperweights. I have these nice heavy glass paperweights. Leave that under there. Okay, so now I'm going to hit this with my heat gun also just to make sure that it's completely dry. And then we'll die cut. All right. Can you guys hear my heat gun? I'm very curious if you guys can hear my heat gun because at one point, but I don't know if that was Zoom when we were using Zoom that it filtered that sound out. And using these pastel colors, I think it proves to me, if to not anybody else, that they are, when you're going for that really beautifully soft color, the pastel colors are just as useful as the really bright, vibrant colors. They're great for just keeping it toned down a little bit. If you're trying to do that really soft, ethereal watercoloring, the pastel colors keep things in a more pastel level. If you understand, if that makes sense. So we're just going to. I cleaned up my desk, so all of my little bits of tape along the edges are cleaned off. Usually I have a little collection of used washi tape that I keep on the side of my desk so that I don't waste it, because waste not, want not. You can hear it, but it's not bad. Well, that's good. So I also took the liberty of, which I might cut that section off. I hot foiled, that's the word I'm looking for, a sentiment from the Magnificent Magnolia set, Better Press set. Um, so I'm just going to also die cut that just to be quick. All right, I shall return again. Okay. Ta-da. All right, so we're going to trim that off right there, which also cuts down on the amount of time that you have to spend watercoloring. You don't have to watercolor the entire image. You can just do part of it. All right, so we've got our greeting. We have our lovely Magnolia flower bouquet. Trim this. I'll go a little bit further. Okay, let's see. I might just grab a piece of white cardstock. Yeah, I don't like white. This is what happens when I don't make a detailed plan beforehand. I have to kind of kind of go through and guess hmm, how to finish it off. Let's see, do I have any blush in my bag of scraps? I have a bag of scraps here that I am perusing, trying to find a color that matches nicely to finish off the card. There we go. So I'm just going to cut a strip. And we're going to do some finagling since we only have part of the image to use. Oh, this has nice texture on it. I didn't even realize that. There we go. All right. Let's get my pokey tool and add some foam squares. How are we doing on time? Oh, maybe I will be late today since I didn't plan well and didn't know how I was going to finish this. Next week, I'll have a completed card ready to go, and we'll just hope that we get it done. Hello, Becky from Kentucky. Okay. We've got foam adhesive on that. We have some foam adhesive on the back of our pretty Magnolia watercolor. I'm a big fan of cutting up your foam squares so that they fit exactly where you want them to. So much easier than fussing with enormous tape rolls, in my opinion. So these are regular thickness. I believe it's 1/8 of an inch thick um, foam adhesive squares. And I have multiple thicknesses of foam squares. And I'll tell you why. Because sometimes if I'm mailing a card, I don't want, but I still want dimension. These really thin 1/16 inch squares come in very handy. But if I'm hand delivering a card or if I'm making a tag, I want to have that extra thickness. I have been known to double up on foam adhesive just to get that dimension that is residing in my mind's eye. Oh no, I dropped it and it stuck to my table. So we're just gonna tuck that so that it looks like it's kind of exploding out from our little pink band right here. And then I'm going to use this thinner foam adhesive for my sentiment because variety is the spice of life. I'll put that one back. I like things to be firmly adhered, obviously, so lots of foam tape goes into all of my cards. Don't need things bending. Almost done, friends. I'm so grateful to you guys for being here with me today. Even though we didn't have a plan, I think we still were able to create something beautiful. Oh, that's upside down. Hello. All right. One last touch. I love twine. And I love bows. So we're going to put a twine bow on there. All right. Has anybody shopped after Christmas clearance? It's one of my favorite things to do. I get my cookie boxes for next year at 50 or 75 or whatever percentage off they happen to be running. But sometimes I don't really want to deal with all of the people the day after Christmas who all had the same idea that I do. So we're going to have to see. My mom might be hoping for reinforcements next door with my kids. She's got all four of my kids helping her make a gingerbread house. So we'll see how that's going when I'm finished with this. All right, done. What do you think? Some bling, I think, would be really pretty on there too. But we're out of time now. So how did we do? Do you guys feel more comfortable watercoloring? Do you feel like I've given you some useful tips? I hope so. I'm really enjoying these watercolor lives, and if you guys ask for them, maybe Pinkfresh will have me come back and do some more watercoloring lives. I've got one more scheduled with them for next Friday. So if you have any requests on things that you want me to use, color palettes or techniques or products or anything that you guys would like me to use in my live next week, feel free to drop them in the comments. Um, so I'm going to flip the camera around and see if there's any comments that need to be questions that need to be addressed. Let me just change that. Oh, my hair's gone fuzzy. Okay, so let me go through and make sure that I didn't miss important questions. T Bender is shopping and playing, watching the video. Perfect. Does anybody have any suggestions or requests for next week? Looks like I addressed most of the questions, I think. Hopefully that means that you guys found what I was saying to be coherent, because sometimes that's an iffy situation for me. And the technology god smiled upon me today with no issues for my earbuds or my internet or my kids calling me 15 different times as they have done in the past. They know how to use the Google thing, the Google. I don't know what it is, but they say, "Hey, Google, call Emily Midgett," and it calls me in the middle of my live. So we didn't have to worry about that today. Um, so thank you guys so much for being here. If you are watching on replay, I'm sure Jody will at that point have all of the products that I used in the comments or in the description of the YouTube video. So dark colors with watercolor. Okay, I'll see what I can come up with. Amy requested dark colors with watercolor. Christina said, one thing I'd like to see is how to use other colors to add shadows, complementary colors. Okay, I will see what I can come up with. Um, I would like to know, how do you get your juices flowing when you have no motivation playing? And sometimes organizing. Organizing is it kind of helps me get reacquainted with what I have, and then something will spark an idea. You never know. But color combinations are generally where I start with a lot of my crafting. If I have a specific product that I have to use, I will work on color combinations from the start. So let's see. I'll check the comments again after we're done here. So if you guys have things to do, shopping to enjoy, cookies to enjoy, family to enjoy, I hope you get to enjoy them. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining me for another watercolor live, and thank you to Pinkfresh for inviting me to take part in this. And I will see you in 1 week. I don't know what the day of the week that is. I think it's the 2nd of January. It's next Friday. So have a wonderful holiday weekend and a happy new year, and I will see you next week. Thanks so much for joining me. Bye, guys.